He looked straight at me and said, "Just don't tell anyone you're my mother, okay?" As he smoothed his tie in the mirror of the hotel ballroom. The words fell so casually from his mouth, as if he were asking me to hold his drink or move out of the way. I blinked, thinking I must have misheard. But he turned back to the room, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked off to greet another group of polished men and women without waiting for a reply. That's how I ended up sitting alone at a round table set for 10, clutching a glass of water I hadn't touched. My name wasn't on the seating card. Guest of Mr. Grayson was all it said. Not Mrs. Grayson, not even Virginia, just a nameless placeholder. My own son celebrated that evening for being named partner at the prestigious Lawton and Bell firm, had invited me as a courtesy, and now, apparently, as a secret. He introduced me to one of the senior partner's wives as a neighbor from back home. I smiled politely, because what else was I supposed to do? Break the spell of his flawless reputation? Create a scene? At 78, you learn that dignity often comes down to knowing when not to answer. They didn't notice that I stopped eating after the first bite. No one asked where I was from or how I knew Eric. And when the speeches started, he stood tall under the spotlight, thanked his mentors, toasted his wife, and even cracked a joke about how some folks are lucky enough to be raised by a village. Laughter, applause. I sat still, afraid if I moved even slightly, the tears pressing against the back of my eyes would spill. I didn't stay for dessert. I waited until the jazz band started playing and the couples began to drift toward the dance floor. My bones ached. Not from arthritis this time, but from a hollowness I hadn't felt in years. I slipped my coat over my shoulders, nodded at the valet, and waited by the curb for my ride share in silence. The downtown lights glittered too hard. When I got home, the living room smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish, like it always did. The lamp I'd left on cast soft shadows on the bookshelf, where pictures of Eric as a child lined the top. There he was at age 6 with a gap-toothed smile, holding a frog in one hand. At 12, standing beside me with a science fair trophy. At 17, in his graduation robe, arm wrapped tightly around my waist. I stood staring at them for a long time before taking my coat off. My feet were sore. My back was stiff. But what hurt the most was how easy it had been for him to erase me from his story. That night, I didn't cry. Not then. I made myself a cup of tea, set it on the kitchen counter, and didn't drink it. I sat at the table with the lights off, letting the dark wrap around me like an old sweater. And somewhere between midnight and morning, I made a decision. Not loud, not vengeful, but clear. Something inside me shifted like a bolt finally clicking into place. I would no longer pretend. He may be ashamed of me, but I was done being invisible. By morning, the silence in the house had settled into something heavier than usual. I made toast, but forgot it in the toaster. The kettle whistled until it ran dry. My hands were steady, but my mind kept drifting to his voice, so smooth, saying those words like they cost him nothing. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where Eric once built a solar system out of foam balls and string. It still had the scratch from when he accidentally sliced it with a box cutter, opening his first acceptance letter. Back then, he'd called me Mama, with wonder in his voice. Now I was a neighbor. I opened the drawer next to the fridge. It was full of neatly labeled envelopes, bills, warranties, donation receipts. Behind them all, in a faded manila folder, were the checks I'd written over the years. College tuition, first apartment deposit, bar exam prep course. More recently, a wire transfer for a down payment on their new home in Westfield Heights, a gated neighborhood I'd only seen in the pictures they posted online. I'd contributed $100,000 toward it. No thank you note. Just a brief message. Received. Appreciate it. He used to tell people I worked in education. Not a lie, not quite. I'd managed the library at the local community college for 30 years. I'd sorted donated books, fixed broken bindings with glue and string, taught computer basics to folks older than me. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I never told Eric about the nights I skipped dinner just to save more for his college fund. He was going to get out, go far, become more than anyone expected of a single mother's son. He had. And somewhere along the way, that had become a problem. At 10:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from him. Hey, hope you got home okay. Let's talk soon. I didn't mean for last night to be awkward. Awkward. I stared at that word until it blurred. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the Notepad app on my phone and began to list every regular payment I was making on Eric's behalf. Mortgage contribution, car insurance, quarterly property taxes, his wife's continuing education fund. I'd agreed to help when she told me tearfully she wanted to get her second degree before turning 40. The list took nearly half an hour to complete. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just sat there, reading it over, and felt a strange kind of peace begin to settle inside me. At noon, I called the bank. Good afternoon. This is Patricia at Longmere Credit Union. How can I help you? Hello, Patricia, I said, my voice calm. I'd like to review all automatic transfers and scheduled payments from my accounts and cancel them, every single one. There was a pause on the other end. All of them, ma'am? Yes, effective immediately. I could hear her typing. You currently have 12 active automatic payments, including— I know what they are, I interrupted gently. Please stop them. After she confirmed my identity and paused one more time to ask if I was sure, I told her I'd come in the next morning to sign the documents in person. As I hung up, I didn't feel regret. Just a quiet sense of having returned to myself. I walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and took down a small wooden box from the top shelf. Inside was my will, last updated 10 years ago. It still named Eric as sole beneficiary. I set it on the table, then opened a new folder. On the cover, I wrote my granddaughter's name in block letters. Claire Henley, 16 years old. Brilliant. Kind. Still calls me Grandma Ginny. Still brings me wildflowers when she visits. Still holds my hand when we walk the garden path. It was time to make things right. Not loud, not out of spite, but because something sacred had finally broken, and I had no intention of pretending otherwise ever again. The next morning, I arrived at the bank 15 minutes before it opened. The sidewalks were still damp from last night's rain, and the air smelled like early fall, wet leaves and something fading. I wore my beige coat, the one with the frayed pocket seam, and carried a canvas bag that used to be Eric's, a remnant from college, when he still called me twice a week just to hear my voice. Patricia recognized me right away. Mrs. Gray, she said kindly, come on back. We went into a small office with frosted glass and a potted plant that looked half alive. She handed me a stack of printed documents and a pen with the bank's logo on it. You're sure about all of this? She asked again. I nodded. Let's begin. One by one, I signed off on each cancellation. Mortgage support, car loan assistance, educational fund, travel credit card payments, emergency health plan, all of them, 12 in total. I initialed, signed, dated. By the end, my hand ached, but not as much as my chest had the past 2 days. I'd also like to establish a trust, I said. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. A trust? Yes, I said. In the name of Claire Henley. My granddaughter. It's time she had something that's hers. Something that doesn't disappear when someone decides I've become inconvenient. Patricia didn't ask why. Maybe she'd seen enough over the years not to. She passed me another stack of paperwork and went to check with the legal department. While she was gone, I sat in the quiet and stared out the window. Downtown was waking up. People in suits hurried past, coffee cups in hand. The kind of people Eric belonged to now. He hadn't always, but he'd learned how to wear the uniform and shed everything that didn't match it, including me. When I got home, there were 4 missed calls from Eric. Then a text. Can we talk today? You seemed upset last night. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I ignored it. Instead, I pulled out the cardboard box from under my bed, labeled legal. It had everything from Derek's death, my husband, gone 23 years now, to Claire's birth certificate, and somewhere near the bottom, the last copy of my will. I took it out and set it beside the documents from the bank. I stared at the old version for a long time. I remembered writing it with the best of intentions, wanting to give Eric everything I could, even after I was gone, wanting him to feel protected, supported. But all it had done was give him permission to treat me like an option. That afternoon, I called my attorney. I hadn't spoken to Marvin Feldman in over a decade, but he picked up on the second ring. Virginia Gray, he said with surprise. Well, well, you're still sharper than any woman I know. What can I do for you? I need to update my will, I said, and set up a protected trust for my granddaughter. I'll clear my schedule, he said without hesitation. You want to come in tomorrow? No, I said, glancing at the clock. Today. By the time I left Marvin's office, the sun had dropped low and the sky was streaked with pink. He walked me to the door, holding my elbow gently like Derek used to. I didn't cry, though my throat burned. You're doing the right thing, Virginia, Marvin said as he closed the door behind me. I knew I was, not because I wanted to punish Eric, but because I'd finally understood something I should have known long ago. Loyalty should never be paid for, not even with love. And if someone only loves you until they're embarrassed by you, they never loved you at all. That night, I left the porch light off on purpose. I didn't want visitors. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want the sound of tires on gravel that made my heart leap for nothing. I just wanted quiet. And for once, I had it. I sat in the living room in my soft slippers, tea untouched again. A documentary played on the television, something about mountain sheep I wasn't really watching. My thoughts kept circling the same place like water refusing to drain. Eric hadn't called again, not since the afternoon. Maybe he'd finally understood the silence for what it was. Not sulking, not manipulation, just distance, a boundary. I looked around the room, at the walls that still held our life in framed photos. Eric with his first baseball glove, me and Derek on our 20th anniversary. Claire at 5, with her 2 front teeth missing, hugging my knees in the backyard. I should have taken those down years ago, but then I'd always held out hope. I got up and crossed to the bookshelf, reached for the photo album marked 2005-2010. Inside were birthdays, school plays, Thanksgiving dinners where I did all the cooking and all the cleaning too. Eric's handwriting in the corner of one page. Thanks, Mom. Couldn't have done it without you. That was before. Before the wife who wrinkled her nose at my casserole. Before the new house and the new circles and the way he began to say mother in front of people like it was a job title he hadn't applied for. I pulled out an envelope tucked between the pages. It was the note Claire wrote me 2 summers ago, folded into a tiny triangle. Grandma Ginny, thank you for the cookies. I miss you already. Come visit me soon. Love, Claire. I pressed the paper flat and placed it on the coffee table. That was love. Simple. Honest. No shame wrapped around it. The doorbell rang just after 9 p.m. One long, steady chime. I didn't move. Then again. I rose, slowly, my knees aching, peeked through the window. It was him. Eric stood on the porch, hands in the pockets of his expensive coat, shoulders hunched against the cold. His car idled in the driveway. I could see a figure in the passenger seat, his wife probably, but she didn't get out. I opened the door, just enough for my voice to carry. What is it, Eric? He looked up, startled, maybe by the coldness in my tone. Maybe because I hadn't invited him in. Mom, he said, I've been trying to reach you. I know. He hesitated. Can I come in? No. Silence. He looked past me, into the house, as if searching for some piece of familiarity he could still claim. You left the event so suddenly. I thought maybe something was wrong. Something was, I said. I heard you call me your neighbor. His mouth opened, then closed. You told people not to mention I was your mother, Eric. I stepped onto the porch, pulled the door behind me. You made me a ghost in your life. He ran a hand through his hair, like he used to when he was 10 and caught lying. It wasn't like that. There were people there, important people. You don't understand what it's like in my world. No, I said, I don't. But I do understand what it's like to work 3 jobs so your son can live in whatever world he chooses, and then be told to hide who I am. He sighed. You're being dramatic. That word hit harder than I expected. Dramatic. As if decades of love and sacrifice were nothing more than theatrics. I'm tired, Eric, I said. I won't fight with you. I won't beg to be seen. He looked away. I stopped all the payments, I added. The bank knows. The lawyer knows. Everything's been updated. You'll get no more money from me. His head snapped back toward me. What? I've made other arrangements. Claire will be taken care of. She's the only one who's never treated me like an accessory to her life. He stared at me like he didn't know me. Maybe he didn't. Good night, Eric, I said, stepping back toward the door. Tell your wife I hope she enjoyed her ride in the car I helped pay for. I closed the door before he could answer. Locked it. Turned off the porch light again. Inside, the house felt warm for the first time in days. Not because anything had been fixed, but because I'd finally stopped waiting for someone else to do it. I didn't sleep that night, but it wasn't restlessness. It was something calmer, like sitting beside a field after the storm has passed, just watching the trees still swaying, listening to the silence that follows the wind. My hands were steady. My mind was clearer than it had been in years. By morning, I had made another decision. Claire needed to know. She deserved to know. Not just that I loved her, but that I wasn't going to keep playing the role of the silent grandmother while the adults around her rewrote the truth. I called her at noon, just after school hours. Grandma Ginny, she answered on the second ring. I was going to call you after rehearsal. We're doing Our Town, and I got cast as Emily. Her voice was sunshine, and I felt it in my chest. You always did have the voice for theater, I smiled, and the heart. I'm not sure what that means, she laughed. You will, I said, then paused. Claire, darling, I need to talk to you. Can you come by this weekend? Of course. Dad said he might drive me out Sunday if he's not busy. Don't wait for him, I said. I'll come get you. I want to see you. There was a pause. Did something happen? Yes, but not something you need to fix. She didn't ask more, and I loved her for that. On Saturday, I drove to her mother's house, an upscale condo on the edge of the city. Her mother, Marie, wasn't home, and neither was Eric. Claire met me at the curb, her bag already packed. She climbed into my car with that easy energy only youth can carry and buckled in without saying a word. We didn't talk much on the way back, but once we were inside and the tea was poured, I told her everything. Not with bitterness, not with drama, just the truth. She sat across from me on the old floral love seat, knees pulled up, her hands wrapped around the mug. I knew something was wrong, she whispered when I finished. I mean, I didn't know it was that bad, but Dad talks about you like you're, I don't know, like you're embarrassing. I nodded. I'm not embarrassed of you, she said quietly. Never have been. My throat tightened, but I didn't let the tears come. I know, sweetheart. That's why this... I reached over to the envelope on the table. This is for you. She looked down. What is it? Paperwork, I said. A trust fund. You don't need to understand all the details now, but one day you will. It's yours, not to spend today, but for your future. College. A home. A life you build with integrity. Her eyes widened. Grandma, that's too much. No, I said firmly. Too much is pretending to be invisible so someone else can look important. This? I tapped the envelope. This is just right. She was quiet for a long time. Then she got up and came around to my side of the table, sat beside me, and leaned her head on my shoulder. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything. But what about Dad? She asked, not looking up. I let out a slow breath. He made his choices. I'm making mine. I stroked her hair, soft and thick like it had been when she was a child who used to sit in my lap and ask for stories. The same child who still remembered how I took my tea. Who never flinched when I forgot something or moved slower than the rest. I don't know how long we sat like that. But when she finally left the next afternoon, I felt something in my chest loosen. Not grief, not guilt. Something else. Something like relief. I hadn't lost a family. I'd just stopped pretending I still had one. Monday came quietly. No calls, no knocks, no disturbances. It had been 2 days since Eric stood on my porch, and the silence was telling. I wondered if he was sulking or strategizing, perhaps waiting for his wife to tell him what to do next. She always had a say in how far I could step into their lives, and how quickly I was pushed back out. I spent the morning in the garden, pruning roses that had long gone wild. Derek used to do that. Kneel in the dirt with those old leather gloves and talk to the plants like they were old friends. I never had the patience for it before, but now the rhythm of it helped. Cut back what no longer served. Give space for new growth. At noon, the mail arrived. Mostly catalogs and coupons, but tucked between a bank statement and a dental flyer was a formal white envelope. No return address. I opened it slowly, heart already sensing its contents. Inside was a letter, short, cold. Virginia, I'm deeply disappointed in how you've handled things. You've embarrassed Eric in front of his colleagues, and now Claire is caught up in whatever grudge you're carrying. This trust fund you've started behind our backs is not appropriate. If you want to be a part of our lives, there need to be boundaries and mutual respect. That includes financial decisions involving our daughter. I hope you'll reconsider your actions before causing more harm. Marie. I read it twice. Not one word about love, or understanding, or even curiosity about what brought me to that point. Just control, entitlement. That same icy tone she always used when smiling in public. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer beneath the phone. I wouldn't respond. Not with a letter. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed Marvin's office. Feldman and Crow, how may I help you? Tell Mr. Feldman I'd like to move forward with the irrevocable clause, I said. And I want a provision included. Claire's trust cannot be accessed, influenced, or rescinded by anyone but her, not even her parents. Yes, ma'am, the assistant said without hesitation. We'll finalize the documents this week. I hung up. Outside, the wind had picked up. The chimes on the porch clattered softly, like a warning or a benediction. I couldn't tell which. Later that evening, I got a text from Claire. Mom's upset. She found out. I told her I'm not giving it back. I'm not sorry. I just wanted you to know. I sat with that message for a long time, the weight of it both heavy and beautiful. She had chosen, not sides, not drama. She had chosen truth, kindness, loyalty. I typed back slowly, I know, darling, and I've never been prouder. After I hit send, I stood at the window watching the evening settle in. Somewhere, Eric and Marie were probably pacing their kitchen, angry that their control was slipping, planning their next step. Let them. My steps were already taken. I was no longer the woman who waited by the phone or begged for a seat at the table. I was the woman who built the table in the first place. Claire arrived the next weekend with a tote bag slung over her shoulder and a look I'd never seen on her before. Worried, yes, but steadier somehow, like a girl who'd finally seen her parents' flaws not through scandal, but clarity. We sat at the kitchen table again. She pulled her sleeves over her hands and leaned forward. Mom says you're turning me against her, she began carefully. She said this is all about revenge. I let the words settle. Then I reached for the pot of tea and poured us both a cup. Is that what you think? I asked softly. No, she said immediately. But she's angry. Really angry. She says I'm too young to understand what's appropriate. I nodded. And maybe you are. But you're old enough to know what respect looks like. Claire looked down at her mug. I told her I want to spend more time with you. She said fine, then do it without expecting them to foot the bill for your life. I laughed quietly, not because it was funny, but because of the irony. I've been footing their bills for 20 years, I said. They just never expected the math to change. Claire didn't smile. She also said if I keep siding with you, they'll pull my college fund. I set my mug down gently. Then it's good I set one up for you that they can't touch. She looked at me sharply. You really meant it. Of course I did. Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with something older than sadness. A kind of grief I recognized. The grief of realizing your parents weren't who you hoped they'd be. I don't want to lose them, she said. I know, but I don't want to pretend either. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Then don't. Pretending is a disease. It starts small, and before you know it, you don't even recognize your own life anymore. Claire nodded slowly, pressing her fingers into mine. We spent the rest of the afternoon in the garden. I showed her how to deadhead roses and how to tell if a cucumber vine was going to bear fruit. She took notes in her phone, asked questions. We laughed at the stubborn squirrel who kept stealing from the bird feeder. She made fun of my wide-brimmed hat. I called her a city girl. For a few hours, the rest of the world didn't matter. Not Eric, not Marie. Not the empty seats at holiday dinners or the way birthdays had turned into group texts. Just her and me. Soil under our nails. Air full of bees and jasmine. As the sun started to set, Claire sat down on the porch steps. "Grandma," she said, "I don't know how this ends." I sat beside her. "Neither do I admitted. "But I know how it continues. You keep living with your eyes open. You keep loving without apology. And you never, ever let anyone tell you that blood means loyalty. Loyalty is a choice. Every time." She nodded again. Slower this time. I didn't need her to promise anything, just to hear it. We sat there as the sky went from blue to gold to black. Two women from different generations bound by the same quiet truth. Family is only real when it acts like it. He came again. Wednesday evening, no warning, no message ahead of time. I heard the car before I saw it. The hum of that low, expensive engine he'd bragged about once at Thanksgiving, back when I was still being invited to Thanksgiving. This time, he didn't knock right away. He stood on the porch, pacing. Like a man rehearsing a speech or an apology or both. I didn't move from the armchair where I sat knitting. A scarf for Claire, blue and soft, the same color as her school uniform. Eventually, the knock came. 2 short raps. Hesitant. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Eric." "Mom," he exhaled, relieved and tight. "We need to talk." "I'm listening." "Can we go inside?" "No." He looked down at the porch boards, then up at the sky, as if the night might offer him sympathy. "I didn't mean for things to get out of hand," he said. "Marie's upset. Claire's angry. Everyone's saying things they don't mean." "I haven't said anything I don't mean," I replied. He took a step forward. "Mom, please, can we just start over? This whole trust thing, you blindsided us." "It wasn't yours to expect," I said. "And you're not being blindsided. You're just seeing me clearly for the first time in years." "I'm your son," he said. "Doesn't that count for anything?" I looked at him. Really looked. And what I saw wasn't the boy who used to make me paper cards on Mother's Day. It wasn't even the young man in a second-hand suit on his first day of law school, hugging me too tightly in the parking lot. It was someone else. Someone who had grown comfortable treating me as a footnote, an accessory, a resource. "It counts for a great deal," I said finally, "which is why it took me so long to see the truth." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You raised me better than this, Mom." "I thought so," I said. "But it turns out I only raised you. I didn't teach you how to keep me." His jaw tightened. "Claire's confused," he added, shifting tactics. "You've put her in the middle of something that isn't fair." "She's not in the middle," I said calmly. "She's just stepping out of the fog, like I did." He shook his head, frustrated. "You can't cut us off like this. We're your family." "And yet," I said, "you introduced me as your neighbor." He looked away. "That wasn't fair." "No," I interrupted. It was honest. It showed me exactly where I stood. And for once, I chose to believe you. The silence stretched between us. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked, softer now. "To fix this?" "You can stop asking to be forgiven for what you haven't yet acknowledged." He nodded slowly, understanding and not liking it. "Well," he said finally, "I guess I'll go." I didn't stop him. He turned, walked down the porch steps, and paused at the bottom. "I loved Dad, you know," he said without looking back. even if I don't say it right. I didn't answer. I watched him drive away instead. Back inside, the tea was still warm. I picked up my knitting again. One stitch, then another. The letter arrived on Friday. Certified mail, legal stationery, the kind you don't confuse with junk. I sat at the kitchen table with my glasses on, fingers running slowly along the envelope's edge before I opened it. The logo in the corner was from a firm I didn't recognize. Clean, expensive. Inside, a single-page letter. Mrs. Virginia Gray. We are writing on behalf of our clients, Eric and Marie Gray, with concerns regarding recent actions taken that have potential legal and custodial implications. Specifically, the establishment of a financial trust for Claire Henley Gray without parental consultation has raised concerns related to financial coercion and undue influence. We request a meeting to discuss the scope of your continued contact with Claire and any financial decisions involving her to ensure compliance with appropriate boundaries and the family's best interests. Please respond within 10 business days. Respectfully, M. Hillman Partner, Weston and Vale, LLP. I stared at the page. Financial coercion. Undue influence. I folded the letter and placed it on the table. Then I laughed. Not bitterly. Not cruelly. Just softly, like a woman who has been underestimated one too many times. They had sent a lawyer. After all I'd done, after every tuition payment, every mortgage contribution, every quiet compromise, they were threatening me with legal boundaries. Drawing lines around a child they had ignored for years while she curled up beside me and asked if I believed she was good enough. I dialed Marvin Feldman's number. "Virginia," he answered, cheerful. "I was just reviewing the documents for the final trust paperwork." "Good," I said, "because I just got a letter from Eric's lawyers." His tone shifted. "Go on." I read it to him word for word. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was silence. Then, "Well, that's laughable. Not just offensive, legally absurd." "I'd like to respond," I said. "Not with a letter, not with threats, with action." "What do you have in mind?" "I want to add a clause to the trust," I said. "Claire is entitled to the full amount when she turns 21, unless she becomes a legal dependent of her parents again. If that happens, the trust freezes until she regains full autonomy." Marvin whistled. "That'll send a message." "It's not a message," I said. "It's protection." He agreed. We set a meeting for Monday. After I hung up, I picked up the letter again. I considered burning it, but no. I slid it into a manila folder labeled simply, "Noise." Let them rattle their sabers. I was done with fear. That afternoon, Claire called. Her voice was tight. "Mom and Dad are saying you're trying to control me, that you're manipulating me with money." I sighed. "Do you believe that?" "No," she said quickly, "but it still hurts to hear." "I know. They said if I keep spending time with you, I won't be welcome at home anymore." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Claire," I said, "you have a home here. Always." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm not scared." That night, I couldn't sleep. But it wasn't grief or anxiety keeping me up. It was the slow realization that love, when it turns into leverage, is no longer love. It's currency. And I was done trading with people who saw me only as a bank and a burden. My birthday came quietly that year. No cards from Eric. No message from Marie. Not even one of those automated happy birthday texts that people send out of guilt more than affection. I watched the mailbox with no real hope, and it did not disappoint. But I wasn't alone. Claire arrived just after noon, holding a paper bag from the bakery down the hill and a bouquet of daisies she'd clearly picked herself. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her eyes bright with stubborn defiance. "Happy birthday, Grandma," she said. "They told me not to come. So naturally, I came early." I smiled and stepped aside to let her in. She kicked off her boots like she'd always lived here and opened the bag. A lemon tart, just the way I liked it. Not too sweet, not too heavy. A little sharp, like life. We ate it in the kitchen with mismatched plates and chipped forks. The way we always had. And for once, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something else to happen. No call, no apology, no forced family dinner, just her. Claire handed me a card. Handmade, watercolor. On the front was a rough sketch of a chair in a sunlit room. Inside, it read, "For the woman who taught me that silence can be strength, that love doesn't mean sacrifice until you're empty, that roots are deep and not always where you plant them. I love you. Claire." I didn't say anything for a long time, just held the card in both hands. She reached across the table and squeezed my fingers. "You okay?" "I am now." In the afternoon, we went through old boxes in the attic. She asked questions about Derek, what his laugh sounded like, how we met, what kind of books he liked. I showed her the wedding photo where I wore a hat so wide it nearly blocked out the sun. She laughed and begged to borrow it for a school event. "Can you imagine Marie's face if I showed up in this?" she giggled. "She'd have a coronary," I said dryly. We laughed until we couldn't breathe. Laughed like women who'd found the soft places in life again. That night, after she went to sleep in the guest room, I sat alone in the living room. The house was still, but not empty. The photo of Derek looked different in the lamplight, like he was listening in. "They didn't even call," I whispered. "Your son. Your daughter-in-law." I expected to feel sorrow again, that old bitter ache in the ribs. But what I felt was lighter. Not joy, but release. Claire had left her sketchbook on the armchair. I flipped through it. Portraits, flowers, a half-finished drawing of my backyard garden. On the last page, a pencil sketch of me. Sitting in my chair, reading. The title scrawled in the margin, "The Root of It All." I closed the book gently and placed it on the side table. My birthday had only one guest, and it was the best one I'd had in years. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg. The crusts were cooling on the rack, 3 pies, not one, because once I started, I couldn't stop. My hands moved with muscle memory, steady and sure, as if they'd never once trembled over a bank transfer or a withheld invitation. It started as therapy. Something to do while the phone didn't ring. But by the second pie, I was thinking about the old bake sales at church. About the way Mrs. Langston used to sneak a nip of bourbon into her pecan pie and win every time. About how I once sold out my lemon chess before the choir even finished rehearsal. I pulled out a notebook from the drawer and flipped to a blank page. Ginny's Pies. Orders. TBA. Pick up Friday evenings. No delivery. No guilt. It was silly, maybe. A hobby for an old woman with too much time. But it felt like something. A reclaiming. I called Lorene, the one neighbor who still remembered my birthday, the one who always brought extra tomatoes from her garden. "Think folks might want to buy pies again?" I asked. There was a pause. Then her laugh, raspy and bright. "Ginny, you could charge double and still sell out before supper." So I made a flyer. Nothing fancy. Typed and printed and taped to the church bulletin board and the window of the community center. By the end of the week, I had 7 orders. By the end of the month, 18. And for the first time in years, I was earning money that didn't go straight into someone else's need. It stayed in a tin box in my pantry, labeled "Just Mine." Claire helped design the little logo for my stickers, an old woman in an apron, her hand raised in a wave, a rolling pin slung over her shoulder like a sword. "It's you," she said, "but like a bakery superhero." I smiled. "Don't tempt me, child. I might start wearing a cape." The orders grew, but I didn't let it take over. I wasn't trying to build an empire. I just wanted a piece of my own life back. And somehow, the kitchen helped stitch something together inside me, something I hadn't even known was torn. One day, I overheard two women at the grocery store talking near the sugar aisle. "I heard the blueberry one sold out in 15 minutes, one said. "That Ginny's got a gift." I didn't interrupt. Just smiled to myself and pushed my cart along. Later that week, I got a text from Marie. "We heard you're selling pies. Is this supposed to embarrass us?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That night, Claire sat with me folding pie boxes. "They're jealous," she said casually. "Not because you're baking, because you're doing something that's yours." I shrugged. "Let them be." She grinned. "You're terrifying, you know that?" "No," I said, handing her another box. "I'm just finally tired of apologizing for being alive." I hadn't been part of the neighborhood in years, not really. Oh, people waved, sure. They nodded when I watered the garden or brought the bins in. But that's not the same as belonging. That's just manners. But something changed after the pies. It started with Mrs. Langley from 2 doors down. She stopped by with a jar of her raspberry jam and said, "You've got half the block talking again, Ginny. You'd think you invented crust." I laughed. We hadn't shared more than pleasantries in a decade, and now she was asking if I'd tried spelt flour. Then came Harold, retired postman, widower, always kept to himself. He knocked on my door with a tin of old recipe cards and said, "Figured you'd know what to do with these." His wife had written them in slanted cursive, everyone dated like a little memory. I took them with both hands and didn't say a word, but he nodded like I'd answered anyway. By the 3rd week, folks were stopping by just to sit on the porch a while. Sometimes they brought tea, sometimes silence. I didn't mind either. It felt like the house had started breathing again, like it was remembering that it, too, was part of something. Claire noticed it first. "You're famous," she grinned one afternoon, helping me box up 2 pecan pies. "Mrs. Finch said you're the reason her book club started meeting in person again." "Hard to gossip over Zoom," I said. Claire smiled. Then her face turned thoughtful. "Do you ever think about moving? Somewhere new?" It surprised me. Why would I? I don't know, just if you wanted to start over. I looked around my kitchen. The old clock above the stove ticked 1 beat too slow. The curtain tie had been replaced 3 times over the years with mismatched ribbon. There was a crack in the linoleum that looked like a lightning bolt. "I did start over," I said. "Right here." And I had. Not with grand speeches, not with legal threats, just by taking up space in my own life again. By doing small things, baking, planting, answering only the calls I wanted to. By refusing to let love turn into obligation and silence into currency. Eric hadn't contacted me in weeks, not since Marvin responded to the lawyers with words even I had to look up. The trust was airtight. The finances were separate. The message had landed. I was no longer an option. I was a decision he hadn't made, and now never would. I thought that would hurt more. But when I looked at Claire, tucking pie boxes into her backpack for her classmates, I felt only one thing: freedom. My family hadn't disappeared. It had just changed shape. It was early evening when I saw him again. The street was quiet. dusted with the soft orange of late sunlight. I was on the porch, tying twine around 2 stacked pie boxes for Mrs. Langley's daughter, when the black sedan pulled up across the road. At first, I thought it might be a delivery or a new neighbor. But then the door opened, and Eric stepped out. He stood there for a moment, looking at the house like it was something fragile. His coat was too crisp for the warmth. His hair had more gray than last time, and he looked tired. Genuinely tired, not just busy. I didn't stand. He walked across the street slowly, like a man unsure of the welcome waiting for him. "Mom," he said, when he reached the steps. "Can I talk to you?" I gestured toward the porch chair across from mine. He sat, didn't take off his coat. For a while, we just listened to the wind. "I've been thinking," he said finally. "A lot." I said nothing. About Dad, about you, about Claire, about the things I let happen without really meaning to. I glanced at him. "You didn't let them happen. You chose them." He swallowed. "I know." Another pause. "She's not speaking to us anymore, not really. Not unless it's about school or the weather. Marie says you've poisoned her." I raised an eyebrow. "And what do you say?" "I say, maybe you just told her the truth we never did." I looked at him then. Not the suit, not the lines in his forehead. Just him, my boy. The man I raised with peanut butter sandwiches and late-night flashcards, who once cried because he lost his lucky pencil before a test. "I didn't try to turn her against you," I said. "I just stopped pretending." He nodded, looked down at his hands. "You always made things easier," he said quietly, "even when they shouldn't have been. And I let that turn into expectation, into habit, into something ugly. That's true. I don't know how to undo it." I sighed. Some things don't get undone. They just get faced. "I miss you. You miss the version of me that never asked for anything." He winced. I didn't apologize for the sting. "I'm not that woman anymore," I said. "She's tired. She's done being used." He looked at me. Really looked. "I don't know how to fix this," he repeated. "I'm not asking you to," I said. "I'm asking you to sit with what you broke." We sat in silence again. This time longer. The cicadas had started. Somewhere, a dog barked. A child laughed from the backyard across the street. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not yet," I replied. "But maybe one day." He stood. Didn't ask to come inside. Didn't offer empty promises. Just nodded. "If I ever try to do better." I met his eyes. "Then do it for your daughter, not for me." He nodded again. Walked back to the car. Drove away. And I didn't cry. I turned back to the pies, tightened the twine, and wrote a small note for Mrs. Langley's daughter on the box. "Best served warm. Like forgiveness. But don't rush either." I went back inside. Claire texted me later that night. "Mom says Dad came to see you. I don't know what he said, but thank you for not softening it. Some truths need to stay sharp a little while longer." I smiled. Typed back, "I didn't raise a fool. I raised a woman who knows her worth." I saw him once more after that, from a distance. It was at the grocery store, 2 aisles over. I heard his voice before I saw his face. Still smooth, still controlled, still trying to sound casual while discussing balsamic vinegar with someone on the phone. I didn't move toward him. Didn't hide either. Just stood there in the baking aisle, holding a jar of cinnamon and letting the moment pass through me like a wave that no longer knocked me down. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and chose not to speak. Either way, I felt nothing. Not anger, not hurt, not hope. Just the quiet acknowledgement that whatever needed to be said between us had already been said, and that silence could be the end of something too. I walked home with my bag of groceries and put the kettle on. The house was warm. The garden was full. Orders were coming in for Thanksgiving pies. I was down to my last roll of stickers, and Claire had promised to bring more after her next art class. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. That night, I took out the photo albums again, not out of sadness, but curiosity. I flipped through the pages like a historian, studying a woman I once was, the one who smiled too quickly, forgave too quietly, waited too long. There were good moments, real ones. I didn't rewrite them. I let them sit there beside the ones that hurt. That's what aging does. It teaches you to hold contradiction in your hands without flinching. I paused on a photo of Derek holding baby Eric in one arm and a shovel in the other, laughing in that big, open way he had. I touched the edge of the frame and said his name aloud, just once. Then I set it down and walked to the window. Across the street, Mrs. Langley's porch light flickered on. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime rang. I could smell wood smoke from someone's chimney, the promise of autumn pressing deeper into the evenings now. My phone buzzed. It was Claire. I finished the sticker redesign. Want a sneak peek? I replied. Of course. 10 seconds later, an image arrived. A round label with my rolling pin logo, hand-drawn flowers curling around the edge, and in the center, in Claire's careful handwriting, Ginny's pies, baked with backbone. I laughed, out loud. When had I last done that? Laughed like nothing was broken? I typed back, perfect and accurate. She sent a heart. I didn't need more. Upstairs, the guest room was ready. Her room now, really. She spent weekends here when she could, holidays when she wasn't needed for show. We'd started planning a trip for spring, just the two of us. She wanted to see where I'd grown up. I wasn't sure what was left there, but maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe what matters is who you bring with you and who you don't. I was sitting by the window, a blanket over my lap, tea cooling beside me, when it struck me. How quiet peace really is. Not the kind they sell in books or sermons. Not the kind that comes with fanfare or final acts. Just the slow, steady return of your own breath. The feeling of your name settling back into your body after years of being spoken only as a favor, or not at all. There were things I'd lost. Of course. No life reaches this far without grief dragging a few chairs up to the table. Derek gone too soon. Friends who stopped calling. A son who chose the performance of family over its work. But I had not disappeared. No, I'd stayed. Through the silences, through the erasures, through the years of being needed but never seen. I'd stayed. And then, when I was finally ready, I stepped back into the frame of my own life and said, enough. And it was. I took back the parts of me that I'd handed over like favors. My time, my money, my willingness to be forgotten. I found my name again in flour and crust, in a quiet girl's laughter, in the soft scribble of my granddaughter's drawings. In late-night porch visits from neighbors who'd once mistaken me for invisible. I didn't fix Eric. He wasn't mine to fix anymore. But I gave Claire the tools to choose a different story. One where love wasn't currency. One where silence wasn't survival. One where a woman could stand in her own kitchen and say, "This is mine," without needing permission. The trust is hers now. The home, too, eventually. But more than that, she carries something I didn't even know I was passing down. The refusal to shrink. And that matters more than any inheritance. Yesterday, she asked me if I had any regrets. I told her the truth. Yes, I said, but not the ones you'd think. I regret the years I let someone else's shame become my burden. I regret the way I smiled through things that should have been named. I regret waiting so long to learn that love without respect is just performance. But I don't regret the end, because I wrote it myself. So if you're reading this, if you've ever been seated at the edge of your own life, too polite to pull your chair forward, too loyal to speak the truth, let me say what I wish someone had told me sooner. You do not owe your silence to anyone who benefits from it. You do not need to be small so someone else can feel big. And love, real love, has nothing to do with erasing yourself. So go ahead. Say the thing. Pull your name back into your chest like a vow. Cut the pie, light the candle, send the money elsewhere, write the new will, build the quiet life with hands that don't shake anymore. And if it makes someone uncomfortable, let it. They'll survive. You already have. If this story moved you, share it, speak it, leave a comment. Let someone else know they're not the only one who finally said, enough.